Okay, so let's get into this. For decades, the story of the 1990s hip-hop conflict has been, well, it's been the East Coast versus West Coast rivalry.
Exactly. That's the huge, sprawling culture war narrative. It's what's been enshrined in, all the documentaries and books. It's the easy headline.
It is. But today, we're doing a deep dive into some source material
Yeah.
that really promises to just tear that whole structure down. We're looking at excerpts from an interview with Gene Deal.
A critical insider. He was right there for Bad Boy. And he basically insists we have the history fundamentally wrong.
That's right. I mean, our source material argues that the conflict was never territorial. It was highly specific, deeply personal, and really just driven by two volatile CEOs,
Puff and Suge Knight.
Puff and Suge. So our mission today is to unpack these pretty shocking claims, focusing on who the source says really killed Big Jake, the massive security failure that led to Biggie's death, and the crucial, devastating role of Anthony Wolf Jones,
Right.
who the source claims was basically intentionally erased from the story.
And that last point you have to understand, that's the core hook here. Deal's account, it shifts the focus entirely. It moves away from geography and lands right on individual accountability, on security breakdowns. And he claims that the tragic fate of Wolf, who was so central to Bad Boy's protection, was deliberately omitted from most of the major accounts. And if that's true, well, that suggests a hidden layer to this conflict, one tied to loyalty and power that we really need to expose.
So let's jump into that first section. Let's redefine this conflict. The core assertion from the source is, it's crystal clear.
Yeah.
He says there was no East Coast war. It was entirely, exclusively Bad Boy versus Death Row.
That's a massive revision of history right there. It just condenses this perceived cultural tragedy into, a corporate grudge match?
It really does. And if you look at the source's details on how this whole thing even began, it sounds almost ridiculous. It reduces this massive feud to a single personal slight.
Deal frames it almost like a Helena of Troy scenario, where it was Puff's anger that was the catalyst for everything.
Which is a reference usually reserved for, events that launch 1,000 ships, not rap beefs.
Right, but what's fascinating is the alleged reason. Deal claims the entire mess started because Puff got angry at Suge Knight. For what? For allowing Misa Hilton, Puff's former partner, mother of his child, for allowing her to be out west making money to feed her family.
Wow.
And Puff reportedly vowed right then and there never to work with Misa or Suge again. It's all about this specific issue of personal and, financial control over someone in his orbit.
That just seems like an incredibly fragile starting point for a conflict that ended in multiple deaths. It reduces the whole atmosphere of fear down to a fit of pique.
Yeah.
But if it was that personal, why couldn't they stop it?
Well, the complexity just keeps going, even after things had already escalated. Deal mentions this post-Tupac assessment, where Suge and Puff allegedly had a conversation behind the House of Blues.
Conversation about what?
About being all right. Now, Deal acknowledges Suge could have been running a Hoboken hustle, bluffing, trying to trick Puff into lowering his guard.
Sure.
But the fact that that dialogue even existed suggests the conflict wasn't this absolute total war where peace was just unthinkable.
And there was a real attempt at a truce, wasn't there? According to the source, it just stalled out because Puff refused to engage.
Right. Death Row East was being established. This was a genuine effort to expand the label, bringing in guys like Eric B. and Big D. Their intention was clear.
They were looking for someone from Bad Boy to show up.
Actively looking for a representative, or Puff himself, to come to a meeting and, quote, straighten out the shit between Pac and Big and Death Row and Bad Boy.
So that raises the question, if Suge was actively trying to broker some kind of peace, why didn't it happen?
The critical detail is that Puff allegedly refused to send a representative, refused to come himself. It suggests that while Suge maybe saw the business opportunity in cooling things down,
Puff's personal grudge, that CEO versus CEO thing, was just too deep to allow for any kind of formal resolution.
it was never about the coast. It was about who got the final word. And you can see how strict this personal loyalty test was with that whole anecdote about Zipnum.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about Zipnum, because this detail, it really emphasizes the paranoia.
So Zipnum, an associate connected to Bad Boy, was spotted just partying with Suge Knight at the Mirage on 57th Street.
Okay.
And Puff, when he heard about this, allegedly got so angry at Zipnum for just fraternizing with the enemy that Zipnum, he didn't even defend himself. He just hung up the phone on Puff.
So it's not even about violence. It's about loyalty.
It's about Puff's absolute demand for loyalty in his personal rivalry. If you're even seen with the enemy, you're betraying Puff himself.
That obsession with control, not territory, it sets the stage perfectly for the next topic in the source material, the murder of Big Jake.
Right.
This is the event that Mark Curry and others have famously claimed started the whole East versus West thing.
And this is where the source material really tries to correct what Deal sees as decades of misinformation, especially about the role of Wolf.
What's the counterclaim?
It's shocking. Deal's explicit counterclaim is that Wolf, Anthony Wolf Jones, was not the gunman who killed Jake. And Deal insists that Mark Curry, who was there, knows that to be true.
Okay, if that's true, if Wolf was misidentified as the killer, which created this false narrative of motive and revenge, that changes everything about what came next. But why would anyone let that falsehood continue?
Because it creates a neater narrative, doesn't it? A simple revenge plot. One security guard kills another, the war escalates. It's simple. Deal is trying to scrub that simple motive and replace it with something far less connected to the corporate feud.
So who does the source say actually did it?
Deal gives a very specific and very surprising detail. He says the alleged killer was some Jamaican dude from the Bronx who is now dead. Killed by the police at Magic City, apparently. Which, if true, completely removes the murder from the immediate Bad Boy Death Row conflict and puts it in the realm of something else entirely. Street violence, maybe.
So, analyzing the narrative control here, Deal is effectively protecting Wolf's reputation and shifting the blame. And that move, it lets us transition directly into Wolf's documented security concerns.
Exactly.
Which stand in stark contrast to the reckless environment that followed. I mean, we know from Deal's account that there was real anxiety. Kirk Burroughs confirmed that Biggie didn't want to go to L.A. They were getting warnings not to travel.
And this is where the professional details of security become so critical. If you're going to ignore warnings, you better have ironclad protection. But the source material shows there was a massive fracture in the security team right before that fatal trip.
Let's really detail the difference in the security operations because it's vital to understanding Wolf's stand here.
Okay, so you had Green Gate Security, run by Paul Offord. They handled the daily stuff.
The logistics.
Right. The house, the cars, transportation, the bad boy office, that's the infrastructure. But Anthony Wolf Jones, he was, quote, over whatever is happening with Puff regarding security functions. He was the chief tactical advisor. And crucially, he had his own separate contract with Puff.
So Wolf was the guy responsible for the ultimate safety call when entering dangerous territory. And when that LA trip came up, he made a very specific, non-negotiable demand.
Absolutely. His condition for going to LA was extreme, but it speaks volumes about the threat level he perceived. He told them, if you're not taking two tour buses of my NIG from the Valley that's Co-op City in the Bronx, I'm not going.
Hold on, the Valley Mile or Co-op City, why those specifics?
That's his crew. It's shorthand for Wolf's trusted, highly disciplined, overwhelming local security force. He wasn't relying on some hired hands. He was demanding 2 tour buses filled with his own men, the only group he trusted to guarantee their safety in what he clearly considered hostile territory.
And the source confirms the crucial point. Wolf flat out refused the ticket. Kirk Burroughs offers it, and he says no, because his safety requirement wasn't met. He prioritized that professional risk assessment overwhelming force over any financial incentive to go.
Which is a massive statement on his belief in imminent danger.
It is. Now, contrast that professional prudence with the promises that were being made. Kirk Burroughs had promised the trip was low-key, right? Just the studio, Soul Train.
He said, y'all not hanging out.
But the source's observation here is just damning. Deal claims that promise was immediately broken. He says all he and Puff did that month was hang out.
All over the place. House of Blues, movie theaters, the celebrity club.
Constantly. But here's the critical, chilling detail.
Biggie was never seen at any of those places.
Never. He was kept safe, inside, during all this constant mingling that the security team had promised wouldn't even happen.
Which brings us to the fatal excursion.
The only time Biggie went out to a club was the night he got murdered. The source points out that the one club he went to was the one he got murdered at. Suddenly, Wolf's demand for 2 tour buses of security looks less like paranoia and more like professional foresight.
Completely ignored by the people he was hired to protect. And that failure of judgment, it leads us right into Section 4, the true climax of Deal's account, which involves a massive shift in power and protection.
The ultimate claim from the source is that Wolf ended up losing his life behind Puff and his bullshit. And that this bullshit was directly related to BMF, the Black Mafia family.
Yeah.
This is the most inflammatory claim, and Deal says it's a big segment in this book.
And we really need to pause here and understand the scale of what's being discussed. BMF wasn't just some local crew. They were an enormously powerful, multi-state drug trafficking organization, a guarantee of protection from them. That's a monumental shift in resources.
So you're moving from professional contracted security
To raw, organized power.
The source recounts being there the night Meech allegedly promised Puff that he ain't had to worry about Suge Knight or anybody else from that point on.
And if you just synthesize the power dynamics there for a second, that promise changes everything. Meech was powerful. He had dudes from everywhere. A protection guarantee from BMF would, in Puff's mind, make him untouchable. It solves the Suge Knight problem through sheer intimidation, not security strategy.
And according to the source, the consequence of this BMF security boost was the immediate and devastating fallout with Wolf. It made Puff feel he could, quote, talk to Wolf any kind of way.
And ultimately told him he didn't need Wolf no more.
The professional chief tactical advisor, the man who demanded 2 buses of security because he knew the risk, was suddenly just dismissed.
Dismissed because a powerful external entity promised invincibility. This wasn't just a corporate reorganization. This was replacing professional structured protection with highly volatile external muscle and ego.
The source makes a direct causal link. He states that this decision, dismissing Wolf after getting BMF's guarantee, led directly to Wolf losing his life.
It was a fatal move in that power play. And what's fascinating is Deal then references another person, Salsa, who allegedly talked about this exact situation in an interview.
So he's trying to corroborate it.
He's trying to show that this complex, hidden history connecting BMF to Wolf's fate, it's not just a personal rumor. It's an alternative history that others in that circle know is true. It reinforces the idea that the real narrative involves personal pride and dangerous alliances far more than any coastal rivalry.
This deep dive has been absolutely gripping. It fundamentally reframes one of the most covered yet misunderstood conflicts in modern history. Let's just quickly summarize the key takeaways for you, the listener.
We've seen the shift from an abstract geographical war to a rivalry rooted in these very specific personal grudges between 2 CEOs. We've analyzed the source's stunning claim that Wolf was not the killer of Big Jake, suggesting a long-standing piece of misinformation was key to keeping that revenge narrative going.
And most critically, we detailed the tragic security conflict between Wolf and Puff. Wolf's professional demand for safety 2 full buses of security was ultimately dismissed once the allure and status of this external non-professional protection, the BMF connection, entered the picture.
And that led directly to Wolf's subsequent tragedy.
Which brings us to our final insight. The central theme here is this stark tension between disciplined, professional, personal protection and the perceived security and ego boosts you get from acquiring outside power. The failure to heed the chief security advisor, the man who knew how to stay safe, proved disastrous.
So what does this all mean? Here's something for you to mull over. If a leader ignores the explicit professional warnings of their chief security advisor in favor of external powerful protection, is the resulting tragedy an inevitable security failure, or is it a consequence of a fatal flaw in judgment regarding who you trust to keep you safe?
Food for thought indeed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the source material.
We'll catch you next time.